Turn on my microphone, so I'll correct that now.
Good afternoon. I'm Laura Lombardi. I'm a senior assistant attorney general. All right, now is it on? Okay. I'm currently the chief of civil appeals at the AG's office, but in the past I worked on all the different litigation involving the Medicaid enhancement tax and dish payments to the hospitals. So thank you for inviting me to come here today. I plan to give just kind of a general overview of the Medicaid enhancement tax, the history of it, and the dish payments, just to kind of give you an idea of how we are, where we are today. So first, federal law allows Medicaid programs to make disproportionate share hospital payments, what we call dish payments, to qualifying hospitals to reimburse for uncompensated care costs. A hospital's uncompensated care cost is the cost of providing inpatient and outpatient hospital services to Medicaid patients or uninsured patients, minus the payments that they receive for those patients. States receive matching federal funds equal to the amount of the dish payments made to the hospitals, so long as those payments do not exceed the state's annual dish allotment, which is the maximum amount of the federal funds that each state is permitted to claim for dish payments. Each individual hospital also has a hospital-specific limit on the amount of dish payments it may receive each year, and that's based on the amount of uncompensated care that it provides. New Hampshire uses the Medicaid enhancement tax, what we call the MET, to fund the state's portion of the dish payments. This is permitted by Medicaid law, which allows states to use health care-related taxes to fund the state's share of Medicaid program costs. Federal regulations identify 19 separate classes of health care items or services that may be taxed in this way. The MET taxes two of those categories: revenues received from inpatient hospital services and revenues received from outpatient hospital services. When it was first enacted back in the early 1990s, the MET did not have any real impact on the hospitals because the state would pay to the hospital a dish payment in an equal amount as the amount of MET that the hospital paid. The federal match would then lapse to the general fund for the state to use as it's deemed fit. In 1994, there was changes made to federal law that prohibited states from using what they called hold harmless provisions. But New Hampshire continued to take advantage of this loophole for a number of years after that. In 2009, the state eliminated the link between the MET tax and the amount of dish that a hospital received. And this was done through statutory amendments to the statute governing the uncompensated care statute and changes made to the Medicaid state plan. For the state budget in 2012 and 2013, the state then eliminated dish payments for all hospitals except for critical access hospitals, which are certain small rural hospitals that are designated by CMS. As a result of that, most of the non-critical access hospitals filed lawsuits both in state court and federal court. In federal court, the hospitals challenged the rate reductions that the state had implemented back in 2008, as well as the elimination of dish payments for the non-critical access hospitals in 2012 and 2013, claiming that there was insufficient notice given for the state plan amendments that effectuated those changes. The hospitals were able to obtain a preliminary injunction with respect to the 2008 reductions, but later the case was ultimately dismissed when CMS approved pending state plan amendments that implemented those same reductions. In state court, 4 hospitals challenged the constitutionality of the Medicaid enhancement tax in 2 separate cases. And the claim was that it constituted an unconstitutional classification of taxpayers because it taxed hospitals, but not other medical providers for the same types of services. In 2014, two Superior Court judges found the Met to be unconstitutional. The state appealed one of the decisions and planned to appeal the other decision, but before that happened, the parties entered into a global agreement back in 2014 that is referred to as the Medicaid Enhancement Tax Term Sheet. As a result, the New Hampshire Supreme Court has never ruled on the constitutionality of the Met. The 2014 agreement resulted in amendments to the Uncompensated Care Fund statute. And those amendments did a number of things, including it established a dedicated fund into which all of the Met proceeds are paid, and it's only to be used for Medicaid funding. It also provided for the allocation of DSH payments to hospitals for fiscal years 2015 to 2019 based on a percent of each hospital's uncompensated care costs. It also established a floor and a ceiling for the total amount of DSH payments that the state would make because there was uncertainty about the effect that Medicaid expansion would have on uncompensated care costs for hospitals. The 2014 agreement also made certain amendments to the Met statute. These amendments added a definition for inpatient hospital services and outpatient hospital services. It also added a declaration of intent for the statute, for the tax, and it added a severability provision so that if one section of the tax was found to be unconstitutional, the other could still survive. After the state and the hospitals had entered into this 2014 agreement, an issue later arose about the proper calculation for uncompensated care costs. CMS had previously issued guidance back in 2010 directing states to subtract from uncompensated care costs payments made to hospitals from private insurance or Medicare for duly eligible Medicaid payments because those costs were not uncompensated. This is what is known as the third-party payment or the TPL rule. In November 2012 and in February 2013, DHHS had advised the hospitals that the TPL rule applied in calculating a hospital's uncompensated care costs. When the state had entered into the 2014 settlement agreement with the hospitals, which based DSH payments on a percent of the hospital's uncompensated care costs, the state understood that the TPL rule applied. In November 2015, the New Hampshire Hospital Association filed a lawsuit in federal court seeking to prohibit CMS from applying this TPL rule because it had never been promulgated as an official rule. The federal district court granted a preliminary injunction in March of 2016, which prohibited the enforcement of the TPL rule. As a result, from 2015 to 16, the hospital's aggregate uncompensated care costs went from approximately $285 million to $440 million. CMS then promulgated an official rule to implement the TPL rule, and that became effective in June of 2017. 2 months later, New Hampshire Hospital filed another lawsuit against CMS challenging this TPL final rule, and the state intervened in that lawsuit. In early 2018, the federal district courts in Missouri and another one in the District of Columbia issued orders invalidating the official TPL final rule, and CMS appealed. As a result of these two federal district court rulings invalidating the TPL rule, the hospitals claimed a significant increase in the amount of DSH payments that were owed to the hospitals. The state in 2018 assured the hospitals that it would pay the full amount of DSH payment that was due under the statute, but informed the hospitals that if CMS ultimately prevailed on appeal and the TPL rule was reinstated, then the hospitals might be obligated to repay any DSH overpayment that they had received. So it was due to this uncertainty in the law and in the change of circumstances from when the parties had entered into the 2014 agreement that in 2018, the state and the hospitals entered into negotiations once again. And in May of 2018, they reached a new agreement. The 2018 agreement tied the total payment amounts, dish payments to hospitals to a percentage of the MET rather than a percentage of the hospital's uncompensated care costs. This meant that the validity of the TPL rule going forward would not affect the amount of dish payments that the hospitals would receive. Ultimately, CMS did prevail, and the TPL rule was reinstated retroactive to 2017, but that did not affect the payments going to the hospitals under the agreement because they had tied the payments to the MET as opposed to the uncompensated care costs. So the 2018 agreement required amendments to RSA 16764, which is the Uncompensated Care and Medicaid Fund statute. As currently written, that statute addresses the amounts of payments to be made to hospitals for 2018 through 2024, and it grants hospitals a vested contractual right to receive those payments. For fiscal years 2020 to 24, the total amount of dish payments to all hospitals, including both the state share and the matching federal share, must equal 86% of the money collected under the MET for that fiscal year. Payments are first made to critical access hospitals in an amount equal to 75% of their total uncompensated care costs, and then the remaining money is divided up amongst the other hospitals in proportion to the amount of uncompensated care that each hospital provides. Starting in fiscal year 2005, the state is no longer required to make payments in the amount specified in the 2018 agreement, and would be free to amend the statute if it wished to do so. And I'd be happy to take any questions if anyone has any questions.
Senator Rosenwald, I'll give you the first shot since you're the one that asked to have them here. You may want to turn on your mic and pull the microphone down.
Thank you. I guess most of the way we encounter the MET and the dish is in the budget.
Yes.
We've gotten the hospital's non-binding estimates 2 weeks ago. I think they were above plan, but net patient services revenues doesn't take into account costs, right?
The net,
Just reimbursements?
well, the net patient services is what's taxed for the MET, and then DISH relates to the uncompensated care, although now it's tied also to a total percent of the MET.
So 86% of all of this it's restricted revenue, I think. 86% has to go to help support the Medicaid program, either through the DISH program or through other Medicaid provider payments.
Yes.
At the end of next fiscal year, that settlement expires. What is
Correct.
our situation going forward that we might have to deal with in the budget? I guess that's really my question.
Mm-hmm.
I think for the current budget, DHHS has proposed for fiscal year 2005 using the same calculation that's in the statute currently. So I don't know if there's a plan for the following budget or not, but the agreement, starting back in 2014, is where we sort of entered into these agreements with the hospital. We're now reaching the point where those agreements are coming to an end. So changes could conceivably be made, but I don't know if there's any plan to do that or to continue on with the process currently.
So we lowered the MET rate a few years ago, a little bit, right? It had been, I think, 5.5%. Who am I looking at? And now it's
5.4 now.
okay. It could be as high as 6 under federal law, right? But,
I don't
mean,
recall.
what?
You could be correct, I don't recall.
I think it could have been higher
Yep.
than it ever was, but are we able to make changes to any of this, or with the hospitals, or does it have to be all renegotiated again? And then the legislature's just gonna be given it, and we're gonna be told to fund it?
Policy-wise, I don't know what the plan will be going forward. I think there'd probably be discussions between the governor's office, maybe HHS, and so I can't speak to in the future how it would.
But you guys
Play out.
would be involved too, right?
I would think so.
Well, I hope so. Thank you. Thank you.
Senator Delasander.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there any pending litigation at this point in time that hasn't been settled? For example, the St. Joseph's suit that was in the works, was that done?
That one was done. St. Joseph's entered into the 2014 agreement. And then I think the 2018 agreement included all the hospitals. So I think at the end of fiscal year '24, I don't believe there's anything pending that's out.
Okay, so we're out of the litigation stage at this point in time.
Yes.
So referring to Senator Rosenwald's comments, do we have to renegotiate this deal, or what happens going forward?
I don't.
Do you just carry it forward?
I don't think you need to renegotiate. I mean,
Okay.
the agreement ends in 2014. There's no pending litigation. I don't know whether new litigation could be filed or anything.
Okay, but generally speaking, it's a pretty calm sea, as you see it at this point in time.
As far as I know, yes.
Right, good. Now, with regard to the critical access hospitals, we've had concerns about the critical access hospitals and what they're doing and so forth. Are they part of the mix at this point in time? Is that consistent?
I don't know exactly. I don't know if Meredith knows. I know there's issues with the overpayments, maybe.
Critical access hospitals.
I missed the question, I'm sorry, Senator.
If you're going to speak, we need to get you up by a microphone. And introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, Meredith Tellus, Department of Health and Human Services.
Ms. Toulouse, how are you?
Good to see you.
Good, thank you.
Good to see you.
Good to be here.
Good to see you again. Where are we with the critical access hospitals at this point in time?
They're part of the settlement agreement, so they receive a payment. It's not a DISH payment, it's other forms of Medicaid payment, but so that we can be in compliance with the settlement agreement, they receive a directed payment through the MCOs, and they receive what's called a supplemental payment through Medicaid.
Okay, but we no longer, further question, Mr. Chairman, but we no longer make out of the general fund a payment as we did in the past.
It's paid through the Met for the critical access hospitals, the same as it is for the PPS, for the non-critical access hospitals.
Okay.
It's Met funds matched with federal funds. And as Laura stated, it's a waterfall, so the critical access hospital amounts are determined first, and then the remainder goes to the non-critical access hospitals.
Okay, and one further question, Mr. Chairman. Currently, many of these hospitals have received additional monies from the federal government. How's that being handled?
If it's part of their net patient services revenue, then it would be counted in their Met. And I'll be honest, I cannot remember, this would be a question for the DRA. I can't remember how they split that up in terms of provider relief funds versus non, but whether or not I don't know if the Hospital Association's aware, but if it's not countable as those, then it wouldn't be taxed.
But at the present time, we're considering it a taxable item.
Well, only if it would be counted as net patient services revenue, only if it's tied to a patient service.
And would we have to get that ruling from Revenue Administration?
DRA would know how they're taxing that, yep.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
As I understand it, moving forward, since the agreement expires, that it would not stop any of the participants in there from going back and filing a suit against us, being proactive, People are suggesting that it would be better to, either extend the agreement that we have right now to get it to sync up with a normal budget cycle, or to negotiate a new one, or other things. And certainly, I don't know who I get that guidance from, which is the best course of action, but I certainly don't know the answer to that. And again, I don't know whether the parties that were litigating this the last time are prone to litigate it again if we don't get that agreement. Anything in there that I said that's really wrong, or?
No, I think that's accurate. There have been changes to the Met statute made in response to those prior rulings finding unconstitutional. And again, the Supreme Court never had a chance to rule on the issue, so.
All right, questions from the committee members? Thank you very much.
I just have one, but it's
Senator
really more
Roseman.
for Mr. Ripple. When we see this money in the budget, does it show up as like other restricted funds?
It does. It shows up as agency income, and you would see it in two different accounts. I know I don't have a microphone, I'm sorry. You would see it in the uncompensated care amount in the HHS budget, and you would also see it in Medicaid care management, because those are the two places that Met is used per the agreement.
Okay, but it won't be as general funds?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, seeing no other questions, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Before we go on, I want to ask the committee members, what other presentations? We talked about having Health and Human Services come over, but there's such a big department, I would rather, if we're going to do them, to break it back down into some kind of division, so that when the presentation that Health and Human Services did to the governor, when I watched that, I didn't get a whole lot of useful information out of it, because they were doing, in 30 minutes, they were doing 1/4 to 1/2 of the budget, so that it didn't do a lot for me, okay? And that's why if we're going to do Health and Human Services, I want to get it at a lower level. So if anybody knows of anything that they want a presentation on now from one of the other departments or whatever, notify me, notify Deb, talk about it now, whichever. Senator?
A question, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, how are we going to handle the department? Are we going to bring them in as we've done in the past, and they make their presentation to us, and we have the question and answer period that as that goes
And
on?
that's,
Is that the process you're going to use?
well, again, that's one of the reasons why I'm going around talking to former chairs of finance. And you know that you and I are going to have a meeting sometime when it gets scheduled.
Sure.
But, those meetings need to take place, whether they take place now or when we get the budget.
Sure. I just think from my perspective, we've done away with the big book in some recent discussions. When I chaired it, I preferred going through it in that fashion, because we had a direct line of communication between the department and ourselves, and the questions that we were answering. Kevin, you probably remember that, when we'd go through it on a line-by-line basis, because of the complexity of the issue and the intensity of the issue at that time. And there were two schools of thought. One school of thought was get as much federal money as we possibly could. There was another school of thought that was opposed to that. And we've dealt with both of those issues. And one issue has an effect on the bottom line and the aggregate number that appears at the end of the budget. And the other has a negative situation in terms of it. And you might add it in House Bill 2, but generally speaking, it doesn't appear in the budget process. Now that's, when Senator Green chaired us, he was definitive in his approach that we wanted to get every federal dollar that we could in terms of a match. That was his really his governing narrative as we began the process. Others have had a different perspective on that. my sense is I prefer looking at the book as it's presented to us and then making the decisions with obviously with the consent of the chair as to where we're going at this point in time. Because this is the most significant piece of legislation we deal with, the budget. And what's happened to the budget in the last couple of bienniums is House Bill 2 has not only become the budget, but it's become the policy issue. I'm not sure that that's the right thing to do, but if we handle the budget properly, that's my basic concern, and how we address that big book.
Your concerns are duly noted, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And with that, we'll move into the hearing on Senate Bill 122, and welcome Senator Avard.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Avard is going to introduce a bill in judiciary right this second, and we'll get him back here as quickly as possible.
Then what we will do,
If you would like to have somebody introduce the bill and start discussion, he can come back and testify.
I pick you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Grant Bossy. I am the Deputy Chief of Staff for the New Hampshire Senate, here on behalf of Senator Avard, who is about 30 feet down the hall and will be back here momentarily to discuss his bill, Senate Bill 122. This bill appropriates money to fund a pier on Hampton Beach. This has grown out of a study committee, which was championed by Senator Avard, and the recommendations were to go ahead and build the pier. This bill follows up on that, and he will be back to tell you why that's a good idea shortly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no committee questions from the committee, going right to the list, we have Nancy Stiles. Welcome, Senator.
Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Senator Gray, Chairman. I'm delighted to be back with you this afternoon, only I'm wearing a different hat. I am now serving as chair of the Hampton Beach Area Commission, and I have their permission to speak with you today on their behalf. Hampton Beach Area Commission was formed by the legislature in 2023. And if you look at RSA 216J3 Roman 1, one of the duties is to consult and advise the state and the town on implementation of the Hampton Beach Master Plan, including capital improvements. And that's one of the reasons that I'm here today. In 2019, you graciously put in $14.5 million to refurbish all of the state parks facilities on the east side of the boulevard, which generated $300+ million of private investment on the west side. And I think if you check with DRA, you will see that that has greatly improved their meals and room tax. Senator Avard initiated this project to build a pier over the jetty, over the Hampton Jetty, and specifically for the walking disabled. He had met with some people at the beach. He visits the beach often and had met with some walking disabled, and they were anxious to be able to go out and sit on the water, not necessarily go into it, but to experience it by sitting on it. And so he thought it would be a good idea to propose a pier, and he had great visions for that. Well, that got put into a study committee, and the study committee came out with a recommendation to move forward, and that developed a feasibility study in 2022 to see if it was feasible to build a pier there. At that time, Hampton Beach Area Commission, HBAC, was identified as the overseer of the project. And in July of this past year, the Executive Council approved the contract, and so we had 4 months to accomplish that study. That was completed, and I turned in an electronic copy and a print copy of the results of that study to the Senate clerk. Senate Bill 122 continues the project, and it looks at the official siting, because when the study looked at it, it identified 3 places that were viable to build a pier on Hampton Beach. The very north, next to Boar's Head, the center of the beach where the seashell area is, and the state park area at the south end of the beach. So those are the 3 areas that they looked at. 122 would officially cite the project and get the permits from the federal government and the final design and construction. We may be able to also identify the uses of the pier, as well as perhaps to make sure that the walking disabled are eligible to use the pier free. And maybe, just maybe, state parks could charge a small fee for visitors or our recreational fishermen to use it. And maybe for the recreational fishermen, we could even have a discounted fee for a seasonal pass, like we do for our skiers up north and our seniors. New Hampshire works much faster than the federal government in its work, and so permitting can take a longer time than is allowed in the time frame of the bill as it stands right now. So what I'm asking of you is, if this bill could be amended to allow the dollars to be non-lapsing, that would give time for us to get the, number one, to get the official siting, which we're looking at down at the south end at the state parks, and the permitting, and then the construction to begin. And just maybe this would become another icon like we have in other parts of the state. I think coming over that bridge and seeing that 1,000-foot pier out into the ocean for people to enjoy would also help our businesses at the south end of the beach as well. So I ask you to please look to amend it positively and to pass the bill. And I have copies of my testimony for you, but I need to apologize first of all to Senator Gray, because when I looked on the web to see who was chair of Finance Committee, Senator Ennis, I gave you the promotion.
I won't feel hurt.
Okay, thank
Are
you.
there any questions from the
But I'll
senator?
take questions.
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. It's great to see you.
It's nice to be here.
I totally share Senator Avard's belief that our state parks should be accessible to all New Hampshire residents. So yesterday, when I read the feasibility study, I was surprised to see that it went way beyond that and talked about making this pier a place for cruise ships to dock and to hold yoga classes and festivals. And so I wonder why the Beach Area Commission took it so far beyond his goal of making the water accessible.
The Beach Area Commission did not do that. When we were given 4 months to complete the study, we hired the engineering firm, DEI, out of Portland, Maine, which had been working with us on the master plan, figuring that they were already in the area, they knew the area, they had done some studies, they could quickly pick this up and do a complete study. I also recognize that I have a commission of 9 people, and although we're all very bright people with different backgrounds, we had no idea how to complete this. So I established a peer advisory committee of 23 members. And on that committee, I had 4 representatives from the walking disabled community. I had all of the state agency people represented there. I had residents. I had the lifeguards for safety. I had the police and fire. The town, the village district. I tried to cover all of the stakeholders that I could possibly think of. And I know exactly who made that statement because it was one of the residents at the beach. And we had nothing to do with the vision of boats coming in and start docking and do all of this kind of stuff. The vision for this pier is for the walking disabled to be able to go out and access being on the water, not in it, but on the water. And also providing a greater opportunity for our recreational fishermen who were fishing off the bridge, but probably will no longer be doing that because it's not really a safe place to be standing on that bridge to fish. So it gives them that opportunity as well. Plus, if it can make state parks any money, I used to sit on the State Parks Advisory Committee, and I would look for any way I could help our state parks to increase their revenue. So I don't think we're looking at that individual's comments in its entirety.
Okay, additional questions? Seeing none, thank you, Senator
You're welcome.
Avard.
Thank you, Senator Stiles. And thank you, committees. And for the record, I'm Senator Kevin Avard. I am the prime sponsor of this bill. And I'm very grateful for Senator Stiles to be able to be here and talk about this. When I was a kid, my friend Norman and I, we would take a bus to Hampton Beach. And it has a very important place in my heart. And I have to go there at least a few times a year. And it seems like every time I go, I see people walking on the beach. They're enjoying it. They've got their dogs. And God is my witness. This past weekend, I went to the beach with my wife. We parked where the statue of the lady is there. And in that inner circle, Mr. Chair and folks, there's a gentleman with his wife. He was in a wheelchair. And he's watching everybody on the beach. And they're enjoying the beach from that one little spot. I'm granted they can enjoy the sidewalk. And I embarrassed my wife. I said, hey, I don't want to go talk to them. And she didn't even roll her eyes this time. She's just numb to it. But I went over to the individual and I said, hi, I'm Senator Kevin Avard, and please watch tomorrow at the hearing. So if you're watching, hi, I really am Senator Avard. I'm not a stranger. But I asked him, I said, well, so what do you think about a pier being at the other end of the beach, where, people who are handicapped can actually go out over to the water and enjoy fishing? And it took him a second to look at me like, okay, are you really serious? And I said, yeah, I'm very serious. He said, oh, it'd be great as long as it was accessible for handicapped individuals. I said, well, that's the whole reason for the pier. The impetus for this was actually a couple years back when I seen a senior lady. She was looking at the jetty. And I said, hey, I ran over to her, and I said, so what do you think about a pier being here in Hampton? Have you ever gone out on the jetty? She says, no, but I've been coming here since I was a little girl. My sister and I always come. We're from New York. And you've never been on the jetty? And she said, no, it's too dangerous. And then I said, oh, okay. And she said, my sister's over there where the bathrooms are. She's sitting in a wheelchair. It's a true story. God's my witness. I'm telling you. And she just sits in the wheelchair and from that point where the dunes are. And she's just looking at the ocean from there. So, somebody had an idea of putting, ramps up where the flume is. Somebody had an idea of building roads. Somebody had an idea of making a building, accessible for handicapped individuals. Why can't we do that at one of our state parks? Making it accessible to individuals that can't get out there. Last year, Tracy and I, we went to Salisbury Beach, and I'm sorry for those who, I am the chair of fishing game, but we did go to Salisbury Beach, and we saw somebody in a wheelchair being traversed down to the beach in one of those big fat tire things. It took 3 individuals to help this individual get to the beach so she could sit at the beach. And it was painful to watch them wheel her up, even though they have one of those kind of ramps that go over the sand. It was painful to watch these 3 gentlemen help her up that ramp. And I thought, and of course Tracy's looking at me, yeah, I know what you're thinking. And then that same day, we saw an individual run out into the beach, and he started swimming. A young kid. And he started swimming, and he kept swimming, and he kept swimming. And then finally a couple of paddle boards from way over started going after him, and because he kept swimming. And they caught up to him, and he kept swimming. And then the Coast Guard came by, and they went right past him, and he kept swimming. Finally, from both ends of the beach, two individuals on a paddleboard racing for their life after this individual who was going all the way out there. They finally caught up to him, and apparently he had an autistic, he was autistic. They caught him, they helped him back to shore. He was going to Europe. But the reason I bring that up is not only would the pier also be available for the handicapped, there could also be a service station just on the side of the pier where there could be seduced, where they don't have to traverse the jetty, not the jetty, but the breakers, so that rescue could be easily accessible for the rest of the Hampton Beach. It would definitely be a wonderful thing for the area. It would open up the season for a little bit longer, and that is the impetus for why I'm suggesting this. Our DD community should be able to go out and enjoy the beach just as much. And I guarantee this will be a draw for the state of New Hampshire. It will be a beautiful statement that we do care about the individuals who are handicapped, maybe went to war, our veterans, our seniors, and of course, definitely the DD community. So that's why I put it in the bill. The guts of the bill, Senator Stiles spoke eloquently about it, and I'm not looking forward to ocean liners coming and parking at it. I'm just not looking for that. But better to have the ability to do it than not need it, than need it and not have it. So I think we can build a beautiful pier, making it accessible for everybody in the state of New Hampshire. And that's my testimony.
Thank you, Senator. Questions from the committee?
Senator Avard, thank you. Appreciate the testimony. Senator Stiles mentioned the economic impact of some of the more recent state-funded development in Hampton. Do we have any estimates on the economic impact of this project?
In which way? A cost benefit or a cost?
Not so much that, but what might happen with the local area and the local businesses and that sort of thing.
Well, I'm not an economist, but I think it would be a great
I do too. I just was hoping it might be quantified because we're being asked to make a $22 million investment, which is substantial.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be nice to have a bigger picture of it.
That I don't have available, but having gone to Salisbury
Yeah.
and looking at, they got a little Ferris wheel. Hey,
Yeah.
we got a pier,
Well,
so.
I have a sister and brother-in-law on Tybee Island in Georgia, and they have one of these piers, and there's a lot of activity right around it.
Yeah.
To be sure.
And keeping in mind, I do believe it'll be a benefit financially for a lot of but I think the greatest benefit, and keeping my focus on the fact that individuals that can't walk and traverse and maybe are in one of those electric chairs, there's a draw.
Senator, we've got lots of people.
Yes,
on the
sir.
list.
So I just want to let you
And
know
I do detect some repetition.
and I'm very good at that. So with that, I will end my testimony and thank you very much.
Questions from any other senator? All right, thank you. Representative Chris Munns.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Representative Chris Munns. I serve as one of 4 representatives from Hampton and Rockingham County District 29. I'm here to provide you with the perspective of someone who's lived in Hampton 3 miles down from the main beach along Ocean Boulevard year-round for the past 26 years. The pier this bill would appropriate, that you would appropriate funds for, is not well known within the community. It hasn't been discussed that broadly. The few people who know about it, who I have talked to, are concerned about what it will do to traffic and the already difficult process of finding parking at the beach. Our concerns are greatest with regard to the 2 proposed locations at the north end of the main beach, particularly the one closest to Boar's Head. Those 2 locations are also in front of mostly residential properties far away from the main entertainment and business district, and therefore they would be most disruptive to the residents of in those areas. Those of us who live in Hampton year-round are also very concerned about the additional burden a pier would have on our existing hard roads, wastewater and water systems, and soft police and fire infrastructure. The taxpayers of Hampton are already absorbing a share of the costs associated with visitors to Hampton Beach State Park that are not commensurate with the share of state revenues we are receiving. We would want to be assured that when those costs go up, if a pier is constructed, we will be appropriately compensated. My greatest concern, however, is the fact that many homeowners in the Hampton Harbor area are and have been for many years experiencing regular and severe flooding during high tides and storms. And attached to my testimony are pictures of flooding that occurred just this month. In March 2021, the Hampton Harbor Flooding Evaluation Study was completed, and a copy of that can be found at a link that I included in the document. The report essentially identifies three options: resist by building a barrier, accommodate by raising all of the roadways and buildings in the area, retreat by abandoning the property. Each of these options has a cost, which is not insignificant. If the state of New Hampshire has $22 million that it wants to invest in Hampton, then my strong preference and recommendation to you would be that that money be invested in ways to permanently address this flooding issue. While a pier, if properly sited and constructed, could be a very nice addition to Hampton State Beach Park, we have more pressing priorities that should be addressed first. Thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much, Representative.
Thank you.
And we'll go right to Bob Preston. The young lady that's standing in the back and Representative, if there are chairs up in the front, we prefer that you be in the chairs instead of standing. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to everybody here. Before I get going, though, I look around the room and I'm reminded that Hampton has had some terrific state senators over time. We were very, very fortunate. My dad being one of them, he was a state senator in Hampton for 18 years. So I'm aware of all the work that you people have to do on our behalf. I also wanted to thank Senator Avard for bringing this bill forward to help continue to make our beach a better beach. I'm here speaking as the chairman of a committee of 25 people, well represented from the business people, the state people, to walking disabled people, people that want to give somebody else an opportunity to come out and see the beach from a different perspective. Recently retired Phil Bryce would often comment that our state park in Hampton Beach was one of the jewels of the state park. In fact, it raises a lot of money to continue to run our park system throughout the state. And I think an investment in a pier would continue to do that. It would allow us to have a longer season. It would bring more people to the beach at different periods of time. Our committee reviewed 3 or 4 different locations, one being near Boar's Head, one near the Seashell, and it was decided that the state park, South Beach, might be the best location because that would give us more room. It would extend the beach. It's not as crowded down there. It would allow people to come in and go just to the park if you were disabled. Or I pictured grandparents taking their kids out to the park, I mean, to the pier. It would be pretty special. One of the things I just heard was how are we going to pay for it? Well, I can tell you the improvements that we've made in Hampton over the last few years. When you go look at all the new condos that are being built and the taxes and the room and meals taxes, the transfer taxes, will go a long way to help pay for this. So it would, I think it'd be a big benefit for our beach to continue to make it better. With respect to Representative Munns and his 26 years, I appreciate his efforts, but I've got 60 years of trying to make that beach a better beach. My little real estate office contributes $200,000 a summer in room and meals taxes. I look around, and every time you go out and you have a Budweiser, the state gets 40 to 50 cents in taxes. You have a slice of pizza, it's 40 cents. So Hampton Beach does contribute a substantial amount into our state coffers. If there's something else I can answer for you, if you have some questions, I'd be happy to do so.
Is there any questions from the committee members? Senator Bertzel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. In response to the testimony before you, there were concerns about the taxpayers or the constituents not knowing about it. Has this idea been presented to them, and what do you feel is the feedback?
Senator Stiles put together a committee that was well represented from all over. We had 4 hearings at the beach at different times. I think as time goes on, more people will endorse it, particularly at the south end of the beach, because it's not going to be, it won't have an impact on the crowds that the main beach would have. We won't have a parking issue there. I think it's another reason, for people to enjoy the beach.
Additional questions from the senators?
Thank you for coming in. Do you envision any direct revenue from the pier itself? I mean, would there be a fee charge to go on it? I know I went on one in Florida and they charged a couple of bucks to go out. I mean, what do you envision there? How would you see it as bringing extra revenue or any revenue in?
I think that's a good conversation to have. I think that would certainly be up to state parks. As I say, we're big supporters, proponents in the state park, doing well, because it's important. We all have to work together as a community, as a Chamber of Commerce, as state parks.
I believe that we have a representative from the state parks that will be able to talk to them.
Okay, so getting one more point to revenue at the state park. If it was down there, there's room for, I think, for the state parks to monetize this. If, for instance, they wanted to bring in a restaurant and do, have a land rent, somebody they could lease out the restaurant. If you wanted to come in and bring in gaming or something like that at the restaurant, that's another reason to come. So I think there's a lot of possibilities because there's just so much room in that state park lot.
Additional questions from the senators? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hampton Area Chamber of Commerce, John Nyhan. Welcome. We are running a little late, so I am going to try to keep everybody on task, and things that have been said before, we'll try to just note those and go on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the Senate Committee, I do have just one page, not multiple pages.
Introduce yourself if you would.
My name is John Nyhan, President of the Hampton Area Chamber of Commerce. I come in front of you today representing the Chamber of Commerce and its 450 business members, many of which are located on Hampton Beach. So I'm going to try not to duplicate what the previous speakers talked about. I want to focus in on outdoor recreational opportunities. Interesting enough, my marketing director just came back from a travel show in New York City. And one of the popular questions was, first of all, is there an ocean in New Hampshire? And we guaranteed him that there was. But second was that what kind of outdoor recreational opportunities were there in Hampton? So outdoor recreational opportunities, I think, is very important. I'm here to speak in favor of Senate Bill 122. I have been involved, like Senator Stiles and Bob Preston, from the very beginning, even before Senate Bill 346 was adopted. I believe by adding additional outdoor recreational opportunities to our many visitors and residents, including those that are handicapped,
will be beneficial to all. The state through meals and room taxes, and New Hampshire State Parks by providing some possible additional revenue. And to go back to Senator Ennis and his asking of if there's any revenue projections, I can only say that I was directly involved with Senator Stiles on the Hampton Beach redevelopment of state parks. During that period of time, we came to this body and talked about return on investment. And for $14.5 million, could the state get its money back? Well, I can tell you firsthand that over the years since that development was built, over $175 million has been put back into the town of Hampton, Hampton Beach, through development and redevelopment. So although I do not think that we would have a whole lot of that down at the South Beach, I can almost guarantee you that you would have an increase and a return on investment. And let me just end by saying, for those of you that might have time, which probably not, but if you do have time, there was a TV show on Nessun that was Explore New England. And Hampton Beach had a 30-minute TV show, all on outdoor recreation. As a matter of fact, State Parks had about a 10 to 12-minute segment of that 30-minute show. And it just really showed folks throughout the region that there could be an awful lot of outdoor recreation activities. I believe this pier is part of that outdoor recreation strategy for the future. So I appreciate your time, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions.
Questions
You
from
can
the
move on.
senators on the committee? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The Honorable Tom Sherman. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Fair. For the record, my name is Tom Sherman, former state senator and representing myself and from Rye. I did serve on the study committee with Senator Avard, and it was actually really exciting to watch the development of this concept, and I am speaking in support. I'll be super brief, and basically my focus on it was the accessibility for disabled and also for safety. Both of those are borne out by other peers. If you do the California coast, you'll see them dotting the coastline, and not only are they attraction for tourists, but they also have a strong attraction for fishermen and for the safety and access, safety for everyone, but the access for the disabled. So I think the location, originally I had been in favor of being up tucked under Boar's Head, but I agree with all the feedback on that, and I think this new location has a lot of promise. So I would like to support this. I would wonder if, given the disabled access component of this, whether this would have some potential for attracting some federal dollars as a way of decreasing the amount of state investment. But that's just my own thoughts on it.
The state parks people will be up after you, so maybe they can address that in their testimony. Questions from the senators? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great to see you all.
Good to see you. And Brian Wilson. Everything we always wanted to know about state parks, but we're afraid to ask, right?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, committee members. My name is Brian Wilson. I'm the Director of New Hampshire State Parks. Pleasure to be here this afternoon. If it's okay, I'd like to read the testimony that is being circulated now. I apologize in advance.
As long as it's brief.
Well, I'm apologizing in advance, but I'll if I can, I'll try to skip over some of the content within there.
Well, paraphrase anything that you can.
Sure.
And
yep.
We would appreciate it.
Yep. Please accept the testimony on behalf of the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, Division of Parks and Recreation, relative to the construction of the public pier at Hampton Beach. We acknowledge the work of the bill sponsors and the Hampton Beach Area Commission on this effort. The Hampton Beach Area Commission is established to assist the town of Hampton and the state in the long-range planning of Hampton Beach area and to implement the beach master plan, has been discussed earlier. The feasibility study was conducted by GEI Consultants and published not that long ago on November 1st of 2022. The primary purpose of the study was to consider the feasibility in the construction of a pier in Hampton Beach for the general public, accessibility, mobility impaired, and elderly access to the water over to the beach, and to provide passive recreational uses such as fishing and viewing. The study considered 3 locations for the construction of the pier in Hampton Beach State Park, and the study concluded in its executive summary that continued implementation of a new pier at Hampton Beach will require further discussion regarding ownership and partnership interests and responsibilities to move the project through planning, funding, design, development, and permitting, construction, and long-range operations and maintenance. The Division of Parks supports improvements across the park system to improve accessibility in the outdoors. Specifically at Hampton Beach State Park, the state has improved accessibility through the $14.5 million redevelopment project in 2012. We provide beach accessibility mats that bring folks right down to the high tide line, as well as a beach wheelchair service that our lifeguards implement. While the state park system is operationally self-funded, we rely on capital appropriations to support major improvements in reinvestment in the state's natural, cultural, and recreational resources left to our continued stewardship. Over the last 5 biennium, the division has requested over $58 million in capital funds and received $26 million in capital support through state funds. Over the next 3 biennium, the division has identified and requested over $115 million in capital improvements. Hampton Beach State Park is one of the few parks that generates enough more revenue than it does expense, which supports other parks throughout the park system that are not self-supporting. While Hampton Beach is operationally self-sufficient, portions of its revenue are also contributing to the funds to the cost of the seawall owned by the state, which serves little or no recreational value and will continue to be a liability to our division. The pier may provide for an additional attraction that could increase visitation. However, as outlined in the feasibility study, further discussion is needed regarding ownership and partnership interests and responsibilities to move the project forward. Whoever would be responsible for managing the pier would likely want to understand any ongoing operational costs, including repair, maintenance, over the lifespan of the pier, in order to plan for future replacement and the revenue sources to support those costs. This is particularly important given the impacts that winter storms have on structures along the seacoast. There's a couple of paragraphs which I'll skip over that are cited specifically from the report here that speak to FEMA high tide, 100-year high tide, flood predictions, and other coastal flood risks and vulnerability. Let's see. Even today, as the division is working with the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management to access FEMA funds to help recover costs from a storm on the seacoast just this past December, a couple days right before Christmas. We anticipate the costs of that damage along Hampton Beach State Park to be in the several hundred thousands of dollars, to which we don't know whether or not FEMA will be supporting that reimbursement or not. Under similar circumstances at the same storm, the Portsmouth Herald reported that the town of Algonquin, Maine experienced extensive flood damage at Perkins Cove Pier, where the pier was, quote, lifted up and torn from its pilings. The estimated cost of repair for that is $285,000. That's from the Portsmouth Herald, January 12th, 2023. The feasibility study provided for a chapter titled Comparable Pair Research. While the other comparisons did provide some detail with respect to programmatic use, construction costs, ownership, and other factors, they all illustrate the unique challenges associated with piers that should be thoroughly considered before a pier is constructed. In addition, the peer advisory committee input regarding a new pier, there was input from some members questioning the need for a new pier in Hampton Beach. And lastly, the locations along the seacoast, other locations along the seacoast outside of Hampton Beach State Park were not assessed as they were outside the legislative scope of the feasibility study. And I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Prior questions that we had was about using federal dollars. Are there any federal dollars available? That you know of?
Likely, potentially, yes. We have federal dollars through the National Park Service with the Land and Water Conservation Fund, of which Hampton Beach State Park is already an encumbered park. And this pier with its outdoor recreational component could be considered for funding for that, yes.
Senator Pearl, you had a question that we were deferring.
So my question was, thank you. I was curious if there was any thought on, charging a admission fee to use it. I've been on a pier down in Florida where they've done something like that, and I didn't know if there had been thoughts around that or other types of revenue sources, maybe from the pier, charging fishermen to go out, things like that. I didn't know what the vision was on that.
Really, in the study itself, there's citation from the many members and from the public output that span the gamut from this should be free of charge to there could be some commercialized development as part of it to the accessibility component of it. The division has not had an opportunity to really know where or when what this would look like. Typically, if a capital project is being generated by the division itself, we would be thinking about these programmatic uses well before coming for a capital request.
Additional questions, Senator Rosenbaum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two questions, if I could. Is this a prioritized need request of the department or a request for the capital budget?
This project is not part of our next 3 bienniums capital request.
Or prioritized need for
No.
the operating budget?
No.
And secondly, if I could, how long before you'd really start using the 20 million building funds?
Well, let's assume that this was fast-tracked and the funding was approved right away. We would work the project scope within our in-house shop of about 4 project managers within DNCR. Currently, we're kind of grappling with how to do so much with the ARPA funds that the department has been issued to spend the $30 million that the department has for that. So we would have a little bit of a bandwidth challenge, but that said, we would start the process. We do think that the permitting process would take a few years at least. Other things that could potentially implicate it is if the siting were to be at the South Beach area, which has been discussed here earlier, that would be probably within proximity, if not adjacent to the existing jetty, which is owned by the Army Corps, and they've been permitted to reconstruct that next year. So there would be a period where there would be ongoing construction. So we wouldn't want to interfere with that, but I think we would probably still be well within a permitting time within the next couple of years, which would be some apportionment of the total funding.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Seeing none, thank you. That's all I have on the list. Is there anyone out there that didn't sign up and wants to speak on this issue? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing, and as soon as we're ready, we will start the next one. Okay. Oh, wow. I do the no ones real good. You're on a good committee, I gotta say. Maybe, maybe Senator, I should have let you testify right from your chair.
I got him worked up.
I'm waiting patiently. And we'll open the hearing on Senate Bill 124 and welcome the Senate President.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. For the record, Jeff Bradley from Wolfboro. Pleased to be here supporting Senate Bill 124, which I was asked to sponsor on behalf of the town of Conway in my district, which is adjacent to the town of Freiburg in Maine, where the Eastern Slope Regional Airport serves that area of western Maine and the Mount Washington Valley. The Eastern Slope Airport was created, as you can see, from a letter submitted to the committee by joint legislation in Maine and New Hampshire 60 years ago. It has enjoyed funding from both the state of New Hampshire and the state of Maine over the years, even though it is an airport located in the state of Maine. It's just across the border, probably about 10 to 12 minute drive from downtown Conway. It serves businesses, first responders, medical evacuation, tourism, education throughout the western Maine and Mount Washington Valley area. It's enjoyed a significant renovation recently of a new hangar that has brought over 8,000 operations to the airport over the last year. So obviously the question for the committee would be, why are New Hampshire funds being used for this airport? The town of Conway lost an airport maybe 20 years ago, 25 years ago, where a big mall is at this point in time. It actually was, there wasn't the kind of space that there is for a runway at Freiburg. So Freiburg has stepped up to take that kind of traffic in Maine that services both Freiburg and Conway. As a result, New Hampshire DOT, Maine DOT, if this airport expansion is to go forward, would need to raise 5% of the overall funding, with the feds providing 90%. Conway's share would be roughly $200,000 to meet the 5% goal, and I would hope that the committee would be able to support helping the town of Conway with $100,000, which is what this bill does. Again, happy to answer any questions. I had hoped that Carl Thibodeau would be able to be here today. He is a select board member of Conway on the board of the airport, but he's also, as I said, a select board member, and they meet Tuesday afternoon, so he couldn't be here today.
Very good. Any questions from the committee? Senator Rosenblum.
Thank you. This, as I understand it, this is kind of a one-time expenditure. Would you be willing to consider using 23 surplus funds?
Yes.
Thank you. That was a quick answer.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a quick question. You may not know the answer. Do we know how many New Hampshire residents or businesses actually use the airport? Is there a count on that?
I can't tell you precisely, but the fact of the matter is Conway is a huge economic driver of the entire Mount Washington Valley, gateway to the White Mountains. Probably has far more economic activity than the town of Freiburg. So it is used by, you know, as I said, for tourism, education, healthcare, to do medical evacuations.
Yeah.
So it's used as a regional airport a lot by folks in New Hampshire.
Follow-up?
Yeah, just by way of follow-up, are any flights in and out of there a part of the Essential Air Service Program at the federal level?
That I don't know the
All
answer.
right, thank you.
Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Brady. I've flown in and out of the airport, and I did fly in and out of when Wild Yaps owned the Conway Airport when I was teaching at Kennett High School 100 years ago. So I've used both airports. And Ray Burton is the king of all airports flyers, and he used this consistently. My question is, what would be the total cost of implementation of whatever?
It's in the second page of the letter that I've.
They don't have it yet.
Oh, I gave it to you. They don't have it. But it's to extend the taxiways and lightings up to current standards. Looks like it's about 3.5 million federal dollars. And then obviously the 10% share by both Maine and New Hampshire. So this is to help Conway with its portion of the 5%.
Further question?
Yes, Senator.
Is it a government is it a governed airport? In other words, does the FAA do flight control?
Part of this funding would be to upgrade the lighting of the airport and bring it up to current standards.
But the question is the airport manned by the FAA in terms of bringing
That I
traffic
don't
in,
know
bringing
I
traffic
can
in?
find out that answer, but
Senator D'Alessandro, I'm on the Skyhaven Airport Advisory Council, and even at Skyhaven, which is, a fairly decent-sized runway, all of the landing and everything is handled, by radio controls that turn the lights on in the evening, and there are no, permanent people that do any flight.
Right. Thank you for that information. I think that's very helpful. But it's a key element if it's a manned field or not. Particularly, there are situations where they man only in daylight hours, and they let those people.
no, I believe this is a 24-hour airport right now.
Well, the key would be the night flights and the bringing of the traffic in. I think it's a safety issue that should be considered.
And like I said, at Skyhaven, they squawk the radio, I think, twice, and it gets recognized. The lights turn on so that they're not on all the time, bothering the neighborhood. But we can get that information from, and supply it.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Bradley.
The other reason that I tend to support this is the lack of health care in the North Country. And you mentioned that one of the things that they're doing is running med flights out of there. Again, we need to get people, from the North Country to the right care in the right place. So certainly,
Especially if they're in labor.
especially if they're in labor. I don't know. All right.
Or they're old like me, right?
I don't see any other questions. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And is there anyone in the audience that did not sign up that wants to at this time? Yes, ma'am, come forward and we'll pass this down and you can sign in. They're passing you a sheet to sign in, so.
Excellent.
You can do it after your testimony, but just make sure that you do it.
I will do that. How about that? So you can move on. Good afternoon. My name is Tricia Lambert, and I'm the Bureau Administrator for the Bureau of Aeronautics for the New Hampshire Department of Transportation. Sorry about that. I thought I would just come forward just to answer some of your questions. I know you had some questions. I did not prepare a testimony, but I thought I could share a little bit about Senator D'Alessandro's question. It is a federal, what we call a NIPIAS, National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems airport, which is supported by the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration. It is not a towered airport. It does not have ATC. But as Senator Gray had mentioned, it is all automated for the pilots to come and go as they please, and it is open 24/7. I'm trying to think of what the other question was. Is there another question?
Yes,
Senator
thank you.
Ennis.
I did have a question about passenger counts and that sort of thing, like what's the actual volume of people, things, et cetera? Do we have any ballparks on that?
Sure. Now that I'm remembering your other question about Central Air Service, it is not part of that program. So that answers that question. I don't have statistics, and I know the airport can provide that, but it is at least half of the people that utilize pilots and aircraft that are based there are from New Hampshire. So it may go one way or the other, but it's somewhere in that ballpark.
Additional questions from the senators? Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
All right. You're going to fill that form out before you can even sit right there. You can sit right there. Okay. Seeing no other comments, we're going to close the public hearing, and as soon as we're ready, we'll open the next. You want the blank sheet?
Yes, please, thank you. Is there another one?
She has the one that she was signing in on.
Thank you. I'll be with you in a sec, Senator.
All right.
All set.
Okay, and with that, we will open the hearing on Senate Bill 125 FN and welcome the substitute for the prime sponsor.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Daley Fournette, and I'm the Senate Majority Caucus Director for the Senate. I'm here today to introduce Senate Bill 125 on behalf of Senator Gendreau. So this bill establishes a $200,000 annual appropriation to the Business Finance Authority for the purpose of providing grants to their regional economic development corporations for a 10-year period. So these development corporations are important economic engines, especially for the North Country. So I'll keep it very brief, but thank you for allowing me to speak. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them down for Senator Gendreau and pass them on to her.
Questions from the committee? I have some that you can, it appears that when I went back into RSA 162-A:30, that talks about reimbursement of funds. This being a new program, it sounds like what we're doing is saying, okay, that isn't working anymore, and now I need to provide them with $200,000 biannually or annually. So I am interested in what isn't working and why the ask went from 0 to 200,000. So those are the questions that I have.
Okay, I'd be happy to pass this on to her.
Additional questions from the senators? Seeing none, no one's on the list. Is there anybody in the audience that wants to speak on this that didn't sign in? Senator Bradley.
This bill should be at least identical to the bill I filed last year, which was incorporated into the budget that also funded $200,000 to the RDCs in the previous budget.
So it's not a new program, it's a
not a new
reauthorization of something we've done before?
Yep.
All right. I learn new things every day. Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you. Just a quick question, but this specifically states this will be an annual appropriation. Does that mean ad infinitum in terms of the annual appropriation?
Well, my understanding from what we did last year, it should have been the same exact thing, that it was annual so it would have been 2021 and 2022. This would be for 2023 and 2024.
All right, we are getting into executive session type discussion right now. We're going to pause on that. Daley, you wanted to say something?
Just wanted to add, it is a 10-year period, the annual appropriation. And that's what you were.
And we'll get there. Anyone else that wants to testify on this bill? Seeing none, close the public hearing.
Be right with you, Senator.
No problem. I can sit here and listen, look at Senator Rosenwald. First person I saw as I was walking over to my first meeting was Senator Rosenwald this morning.
So maybe I'll be the last person you see.
And then someone she knows very well was one of the testifiers in one of the bills this morning, so, yeah, yeah.
I had lunch with him.
Oh, you did? He didn't invite me. I don't know. Relatives, you know, get preferential treatment, huh?
It's good for family bonding. Okay, Senator.
Okay, we'll open the hearing on Senate Bill 114 and introduce the prime sponsor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, I'm Cindy Rosenwald from Senate District 13 in Nashua. And I'm here to introduce Senate Bill 114, the Property Tax Relief Act of 2023. This bill will continue the property tax relief promised last year in House Bill 1221. That bill, as you remember, provided a one-time state payment of 7.5% of the employer cost for police, firefighters, and teachers' pensions. If we think about the history of this, the legislature thought back in the 60s, the late 60s, that the retirement system would be more efficient if the pool was larger, so the risk would be more spread out. So the retirement system enticed the cities and towns to join it for police, firefighters, and teachers by promising to pay a significant percentage of the cost. That was the situation for 40 years. Then during the Great Recession 12 years ago, 14 years ago now, the state's contribution was reduced twice and finally in 2011 entirely eliminated. The cities and towns, individuals and businesses alike, have been on the hook with their property taxes for the entire amount of the cost for more than a decade. So the state's decision to go back on a 40-year promise has been incredibly expensive for property taxpayers. In my city of Nashua, for example, the pension cost for these essential public employees totals over $9 million a year and represents 15% of the property tax bill. Between 2012, when we first got no state assistance with this, and 2022, Nashua property taxpayers have been burdened with $76 million of additional costs. And as I talk with voters in my district, property taxes is one of the issues I hear about most often. Older residents in particular are worried about being forced to move out of the homes they've lived in for many years. Mr. Chairman and colleagues, we've made a policy decision to give ongoing tax relief to businesses and wealthy families. I know we've raised the amount of rooms and meals tax revenues that's distributed to municipalities. That's great. But it's kind of unpredictable in terms of the budget timing. So restoring even a portion of the pension costs that the state used to pay, as we did for the current fiscal year, would be sustainable and predictable because it would be structural. I hope we will agree to give individuals and businesses the property tax relief that they're desperate for and pass this bill. Thank you.
Questions from committee members? Thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you.
Representative O'Brien. Get to you
Good
next,
afternoon.
Senator.
Good afternoon, Senators. Representative Michael O'Brien from the great city of Nashua, District 10, mostly Ward 9. But let me give you the usual caveats. I also, serve on the Nashua Board, besides being a state rep. I'm also Vice President of the Board of Aldermen, and the other hat, or should I say helmet, I was a firefighter for the city of Nashua for 35 years. So being on the Board of Aldermen, being a member of the New Hampshire retirement system, and of course my 35 years of experience in seeing the ups and downs of the pension system, I think gives me some qualifications to appear before you with this. I hate to use the term, although we've been slammed with this, promises made, promises kept. But as Senator Rosenwald said in 1967 is when they came up, and they originally came up with 40%, but it was trimmed down to 35%. And since then, when this, both, arms of this House wrote the law, they didn't put a sunset bill in it. In other words, it was clearly intended by the original authors to keep this going in perpetuum. But what happened in about 11, 12 years ago, a decision was made to cut the 35%, and it was teared down to all of a sudden nothing. So where did the 35% liability go? It went right back to the taxpayers. And this is why the companion bill that's going through the House right now, we are calling it a taxpayer's bill. This has direct impact for some of our all communities of the state, but particularly for Manchester and Nashua. And I don't want to keep my comments strictly, concerning with Nashua, but Nashua is a pretty fine example of what it is. Now, I have from the New Hampshire Municipal Association that does have, and I think the representative, Kathleen Heck, is going to testify. Maybe you could ask her for that information. But it broke down to what would be our cities and towns would get if you put this 7.5% back. And let's look at some of the things that are going on. You don't have to go far from your TV set to see the homeless problems that exist in both Manchester and Nashua. A lot of money gets spent. And I'm glad and I'm proud to be an alderman in Nashua to say that Nashua has broad shoulders to handle and try to deal with this. But from time to time, what's wrong? I ask this, esteemed body, what's wrong with trying to help out your second largest city? We can't do it alone, and our taxpayers to ask them to do that burden. Now, I think some of you may be of my age. You remember the old Christmas account? Christmas savings, you put the money away. You didn't put money away, the kids didn't get too much gifts, but you left $1 sit with the other dollar, and through the magic of the bank, it became $5. Well, that's how a pension system was supposed to work. But you know what happened here? I say, what's wrong with the pension system? Other than bad investments, maybe some other things, marketability.
Representative?
Yes.
You would stick to the bill, the 7.5%. We all have our own opinion
Well,
on
thank
why
you,
the retirement
and,
system got to where it is.
Thank you, Senator. My family did kiss the Blarney Stone before we left Ireland, so I do have a chance to go off, But thank you for calling me back. But that does have a point to it. Like you say, the 7.5% will help alleviate the tax burdens in Nashua. Now, last year, to keep you in mind, I was proponent of bringing it up on the House side, and it did have the 7.5% bill.
We're in the Senate now. We're
Okay.
not worried about what happened in the House last year.
Well, I have to ask the musical question. If it was so popular last year, then why is it not, or would not be popular again this year? The calendar is the only thing that would be the difference. So therefore, I support Senator Rosenwald's bill to get the 7.5% back into the taxpayers. It is a taxpayer's bill that will help out the fund. And there's a lot of things. You say, how about the taxpayers and the 7.5%? That money that the state would contribute in the 7.5%. Ask around, ask your city people. There's a problem with recruitment for policemen and firefighters. It used to be the age-old adage that the job stunk, but the benefits were good. Now the benefits aren't that good. Why do you want to take a job where, people are going to spit at you, take a punch at you, or anything else like that when your pension system is not there?
Are there questions from any of the senators on the committee?
Thank you, Senator.
Seeing none, Senator
Oh,
Rosen.
I got another light. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you for taking my question. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if the state were to participate in this, would they have any stake in the negotiations in the different retirement benefits?
Not that I know of, and I don't clearly understand. What do you mean is negotiation in the retirement benefits?
Would the state, if the state is paying a portion of the retirement benefits and the retirement benefits are in the union negotiations, would the state have any say in the union negotiations?
Well, in all respect, as what the chair collected me back, this bill has nothing to do with unions. And if somebody tells you that the unions or negotiations or anything else is involved with this, this is strictly a bill to benefit the taxpayers in each of the political subdivisions. Nothing to do with the unions.
Additional questions from senators? Seeing none, thank you very much, Representative.
Thank you.
Senator Altshuler. No, if you give them to...
Sorry, wrong way.
That's okay. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you very much. Full disclosure, I also kissed the Blarney Stone.
You need to introduce yourself.
But
first,
I am
Senator.
not going to. I'm
All right.
going to be brief. My name is Deborah Altshuler. I am Senator for District 24, which includes the towns of Exeter, Greenland, Hampton, Hampton Falls, Northampton, Rye, and Stratham. And I'm here as a co-sponsor of Senate Bill 114, the Property Tax Relief Act of 2023. Last year, we did a really good thing, making a 7.5% contribution to the state retirement system. It was a good thing that provided much needed property tax relief to our local municipalities. And now let's do not just a good thing, but the right thing by making that our new baseline. We know we have the opportunity to make good on a promise that was negotiated in good faith in 1967 when the state had 4 separate pension programs. We consolidated, we added municipal employees to the pool, and committed to just over a third of the cost. That deal was executed well and then reneged on in 2011. This was an enormous downshifting to our cities and towns and was reflected in staffing decisions and property tax increases. Our municipalities have been weighted down by this downshifting, and in my district, we are anxious for the state to resume its responsibilities. Last year was a good start with the 7.5% contribution. Now, let's build on that and restore the state's contribution to a portion of retirement costs of teachers, firefighters, and local police. My district was relieved by last year's assistance, and we are anxious to resume that relationship and responsibilities forged when the merger of pensions and the addition of municipal employees was born. I strongly urge the committee to recommend Senate Bill 114 ought to pass.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you.
Dan McGuire? The Honorable. He didn't sign in saying rep today, so I.
Yes, yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Dan McGuire, and while I am a member of your sister committee in the House, I'm here today as a member of the Granite State Taxpayers Board. I'm the longest-serving board member of that organization. So we're opposed to Senate Bill 114. If at the end of the day, when the budget is finished, the legislature finds that there's an unspent $50 million in the budget, there is a really simple way to help property taxpayers, and that's not the way that's in this bill, but you simply could charge the property taxpayers less in the statewide property tax, right? So the state collects $363 million a year of property tax. You could collect less, right? And that would directly benefit property taxpayers. The reason this particular bill is bad public policy is that it contains the wrong incentives. So what this bill does is it sends checks to municipalities based on their spending. So if they spend more on personnel, the check is bigger. If they spend less, the check is smaller. So that's the wrong sort of incentive. The right way to send money to municipalities is sort of like in the adequate education money. If you have 100 kids, you get a certain amount. If you have 200 kids, you get twice that amount. If you have 400 kids, you get twice that amount, like that, right? It's something that's not under the control. We give them money based on something that's not under their control. Similarly, the statewide property tax, right? It's not under the control of the town how much property tax there is, right? So charged to the state, how much property value there is in that sense. So what you want is a system where when a municipality hires someone and spends extra money, that money, the delta in that money comes directly from that municipality, right? So when they spend $100 on personnel, it costs their taxpayers $100 on personnel. When they save $100 on personnel, it gains their taxpayers $100 on personnel. That's the right incentive. This bill causes extra spending on personnel, and so therefore it's overall a negative for taxpayers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions from committee members? Seeing none, thank you. And we'll go up to the top of the list now. Ms. Heck.
Good afternoon, Chairman Gray and members of the committee. My name is Catherine Heck. I am a government finance advisor for the New Hampshire Municipal Association. We represent the 234 cities and towns in New Hampshire. And I'm here to testify in support of Senate Bill 114, which is probably not a surprise, as we've seen many versions of these come forward in the past. I won't repeat any testimony you've already heard to the history, but I will take this opportunity to thank the legislature for the one-time payment that we received last year, which did in fact lead to direct property tax relief, as most cities and towns reported that, and school districts, on their MS 434 as revenue, therefore taking it right off the top before taxes were reapportioned. So that had direct property tax relief. This bill, however, is structured just a little bit differently in that rather than getting a reimbursement check, which we got in the one-time payment, we would only have to budget the 92.5%, and the state would pay over the 7.5% to the retirement system. So this would mean the budgets moving forward would be 7.5% less what the voters have to raise and appropriate toward the retirement system costs. We certainly support the relief that this would provide and the state's longtime commitment that we had had for 40 plus years. And I did want to touch on Senator Birdsell's question. Perhaps if I'm misunderstanding it, please forgive me. But Anytime a municipality or political subdivision hires a full-time policeman, teacher, or fire outside of collective bargaining, they are required to enroll them in the New Hampshire retirement system. That is the obligation. So outside of any type of negotiation packages, the retirement system is set, but the rates are set by the actuaries and the New Hampshire Retirement Board. And RSA 100 is completely under the control of the legislature. So political subdivisions really do not have a say if they hire a full-time police or fire or teacher as to the cost of the benefit or the actuarial analysis. The salary, however, is what is negotiated at the local level. So I did just want to touch on that. So I know there's people to testify behind me, and I did want to thank you again for the one-time payment and take any questions if you have them.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have the mayor of the city of Nashua, Jim Donches. No papers, we like that, you know.
That means I'm going to be brief. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm here to testify in favor of the bill. As you've already heard, there was a legal commitment, actually in law, made in 1967 that cities and towns would always receive 35% of the pension costs, and that was the inducement to persuade all the cities and towns of New Hampshire to join the New Hampshire retirement system. Now that was, as you heard from Senator Rosenwald, that was changed a few years back, but the intent of this bill is to benefit all cities and towns in New Hampshire in approximately, proportionally the same amount. I can give you the figures for Nashua, not because we're more important than any other town or city in the state, but only because it kind of gives you a sense of the scope of all this. So the 2.5%, so Nashua pays to the state about $34 million a year in pension costs. Total budget is about $300 million roughly, and we collect about $250 million in property taxes. Other revenue pays for the remainder of the budget. So as you can quickly calculate, a $34 million payment represents nearly 15% of every taxpayer's entire tax bill. Now what this would do is, what the property tax relief bill would do is restore a portion of that 35%, 7.5. In our case, and I'm giving you this again just to give you a sense of how this affects cities and towns generally. In our case, that represents about 1%. It's 2.3 million or something. It represents about 1% of the tax rate. So you would help us to the extent of, for the average homeowner, that's $75. Still, in a high property tax situation, that is helpful, definitely helpful. If you ever restored the 35%, that would be 5% of every tax bill basically in New Hampshire. And that's the property, that's the amount of the property taxes that are paying for the loss of the 35%. Everybody's tax bill every year, about 5% is going to substitute for the state's obligation. So you can see the effect and why cities and towns across New Hampshire have really appreciated what you did last year. And, we would love it if you were to continue. In response, I did hear Senator Birdsell's question about would you have a role in negotiations? And I think what I've heard the concern before, and you may be part of that, the cities and towns are just giving away these massive raises to city employees, and that's what's causing all this to go up. That is really not the case. I mean, right now, again, I'm giving you our situation, but it's similar elsewhere. Police, we're under an agreement to give them a 3% raise for 4 years running. But inflation is like 5 or 6. So they're not getting massive raises. Teachers a little bit more, but Nashua is was, the reason we entered this contract is we're paying less than the state average to teachers. It was $61,000. So 4% raise they get. But again, inflation is more than that right now. So it's equivalent to what state employees often get, and cities and towns are really strapped. There's a lot of top property tax pressure. So there's no city or town in New Hampshire that's just, you know, giving big windfalls to the employees who work very hard for them, but and earn their money and well deserved. But they earn and deserve every dollar they get, but we're not just doling out windfall benefits or wages. Mr. Chair, that pretty much concludes my testimony. I hope that you will follow suit from last year and give this modest relief in property taxes to the cities and towns of New Hampshire.
Questions from the committee? Senator.
Thank you very much. As you probably recall, it was my amendment to House Bill 1221 that established the one-time 7.5%. But my question is, how can you guarantee that if we pass Senate Bill 57, it will actually lower property taxes in Nashua?
Well, first, Senator Bradley, thank you. I was aware that you sponsored this in the Senate, on the Senate side, and certainly we noticed that and appreciated it very much. I mean, a similar question, I believe, was asked this morning in the House. I mean, if you want to make sure that this goes to the retirement system, we could put, dollars are fungible. So often they just go into an account with millions of dollars in it and money goes out. But we could, if this would make you more comfortable, set up a segregated account, collect this money into it, and then when the time came to make a retirement contribution, pay it out of this account. And it doesn't totally give you the guarantee that you were just looking for, but at least it shows you that the dollars are being spent directly in the way that you would appropriate them. I can just tell you that the property tax pressure is very significant, and property taxes in New Hampshire are very high. That's our system here. We don't have incomes. We don't have sales tax. So we don't have a broad-based tax. So a lot of services that elsewhere get paid for differently in other states are paid for by the property taxes. I believe about 2/3 of the total of state and local taxes, this doesn't include federal aid, 2/3 is property taxes. So the property tax pressure is very intense in every city and town. And we would have had a tax rate that was 1% higher if you hadn't done this last year. I think you can count on the pressure on property taxes to make sure that the local selectmen or aldermen or mayors or whatever, city councilors, use the money for the benefit of the taxpayers.
Additional questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mayor.
And I would like, again, simply just to thank you for your help last year, Senator Bradley. Thank you. That was we noticed, definitely. All right, thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Karen, I'm going to just say Karen Hill, because I'm not sure I can read the middle part.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My name is Karen Leo Hill. I am a city councilor, an 18-year city councilor, and the former mayor of Lebanon. I'm here to add my support for my strong support on behalf of the city of Lebanon for this bill, joining with Mayor Donchis and also the Municipal Association in support of this. And I also would very much like to thank the Senate and particularly Senator Bradley for the work that you did last year. Lebanon experienced a similar benefit last year to the taxpayers with the one-time contribution from the state. But as you may know, of course, as you know, it's important to be able to have predictability and stability. in planning budgets, and especially for taxpayers to be able to plan their own budgets and make their own decisions. So I'm here to implore you to make the 7.5%, which was the one-time contribution last year, to make that a sustainable and recurring contribution. It doesn't get to the 35%, which was what was offered as the inducement for cities and towns to join into the New Hampshire retirement system, but it is a meaningful meaningful amount that will provide property tax relief to residents and also to businesses. Property taxes are a really important part of the climate when businesses are making their decisions about whether to stay in New Hampshire. And we see that in Lebanon as well. And so I would encourage you to think about lowering property taxes as an economic development issue, as well as a workforce recruitment and retention issue for our public sector employees, as well as a property tax relief measure for our residents. Thank you very much.
Questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much. Brian Hawkins did not indicate whether he was speaking or not. Okay. Then we will go right to the New Hampshire Retirement System representative, Marty, and I'm going to butcher the last name. I can't tell whether it's Carlin.
Sadly, you'll probably get used to it based on my volume of time over here. For the record, my name is Marty Carlin, Communications and Legislative Affairs Director at NHRS. The retirement system doesn't have a position on this bill. We only signed up specifically just to answer any questions you may have and to just make clear to the committee that this bill does not affect the funding of the retirement system in any way. We will receive the same amount of money, be it all from the employers or a portion coming from the state, but it doesn't have an impact on our funding at all. Be glad to answer any
Questions from the committee? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's all I have on this sheet. Is there additional sheet over there?
No, there's no one else.
Okay. Anyone in the audience that didn't sign up that wants to speak? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Pass it down to her.
Thank you.
This
is for you. Yes, it is.
I would take a motion to go into executive session, at least so we can have a conversation, if nothing else.
So moved.
All right, we have a motion by Senator Ennis, second by Senator Birdsell, to go into executive session. All those in favor say aye. Aye. We are in executive session. I'm going to let you think about whether or not you want to make any motions on the bills that we heard today. Looking at the list, and I think you've all got it, of the bills that we have in the committees, Senate Bill 20, Senate Bill 42, Senate Bill 57, and Senate Bill 70.
Did we even hear 20, 42, 57, and 70? Was it last week?
Since there's no amendments, the Senate Finance doesn't have to hold a hearing.
Oh.
If there were an amendment and it was germane, I believe we still don't need to hold a hearing. It would only be if in the vision of the chair or some of the members that you wanted a hearing in addition to what happened in the policy committee, that we would hold one.
Mr. Chair, I'd make a motion to pass on Senate Bill 42.
Senate Bill 42, we have a motion of ought to pass. I'll let you.
Second.
And we have a second from Senator Wilson.
May I speak to that?
Yes, you may.
So Senate Bill 42 came to ED&A, and that was a bill that we heard. And this, I'm going strictly from memory here because I don't have it right in front of me.
It should be in your book.
Then I may take a second before I speak. If it is.
Absolutely.
sure
Oh, I
I
see.
get my comments accurately. There we are.
I remember this one.
Would you mind? Yeah, this came out of EDA ought to pass 5-0, and this just simply provided that there would not be interest charged on an overpayment.
All right.
For, that was not deemed to be malicious, and fraudulent. So the EDA committee didn't have any objection with that and voted it through 5-0 on a policy decision. And as you can see from the fiscal note, it has minimal fiscal impact. It's showing zero, but again, I don't have my notes from the other bill. I did jot down, there was a few $1,000s, if I remember correctly, that it potentially could impact. And I apologize, I don't have my other book with me. I wrote notes on it on my other sheet.
Yeah, I wouldn't have brought it in here unless I thought it was more than 10,000.
And I may
but
be
it's
off
still
on my
not-
number a bit. It was not a significant amount of money.
All right, further discussion?
Yeah, I would support this. I think any of us that dealt with overpayment of unemployment compensation during the pandemic and people that got bills after the fact, there were a lot of inadvertent errors that were made.
Yep.
And I think there is a protection in here for willful deceit. So I think, given the fiscal note, we should adopt this.
Additional comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of ought to pass, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. And
Move consent.
it's 5-0. I don't think we can put a finance bill on consent.
7.
Or 7. That's right.
Yeah,
I can't even count today. I'm doing terrible.
Reported out by?
And reported it out, the one who made the motion was Senator Pearl. Yeah, I try to
Ask
help.
and you shall receive.
I'd like to make a motion of law to pass on Senate Bill 20.
Senate Bill 20.
I'll second this one too.
Relative to Keno license.
If I could speak to my motion. This
All
was
right,
a
just a
bill
second,
that,
let me just finish here. So the motion was made by Senator Rosenwald, seconded by Senator Bradley. Yes,
this
ma'am.
is a bill that we heard in Ways and Means, and Senator Ennis as a co-sponsor. It really made some kind of more technical changes to the Keno. It reduced the it eliminated the annual licensing fee, but the financial impact on the Lottery Commission is really pretty minimal, considering how much money Keno brings in, and also allows, it just cleans up the language on who could be reinstated after a criminal. So we didn't see any issues with it in Ways and Means.
Additional comments?
So I would just say, if you look at the fiscal note, there's a small decrease, but overall in the shorter to medium term, the fiscal note says it should increase overall lottery revenue by enhancing more one-time licenses.
Additional comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of ought to pass, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, 7-0. And Senator Rosenwald?
I move ought to pass on Senate Bill 70. The portal. I think it went through last year as well.
It did pass the committee in the Senate last year, yes.
But it does have
I'll second that.
It has an
Okay,
impact.
so we have an ought to pass made by Senator Birdsall, seconded by Senator Ennis. Discussion.
It does have an impact, though. I just looked at the
It does have an impact. It will require computer programming to do this. And it also, in the fiscal note, you'll see that they said that they needed 2 extra people. I had a discussion with the Deputy Secretary of State yesterday or today, I guess it was yesterday, questioning that, and she said that they anticipate many questions coming in from the various town clerks, city clerks, supervisors' checklist. It may not be 2 people, and that may not be over a long period of time, but they do anticipate that there will be some training of the individuals as it goes through. Any additional comments? Okay, we have a motion about to pass. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And Senator Birdsall.
It's your bill.
I'm on a roll here.
I got it.
I'm on a roll. All right, Senate Bill 57.
I will second that one as well.
Okay, let me get
Whoa.
there. You gotta go back.
All I have is the fiscal notice. Oh, there's.
Okay, relative to the reduction of the calculation of the state retirement annuity at age 65.
What this does, Mr. Chairman, is change eliminates the age 65 and 7 members.
Lou, can you put your
They want to hear you.
Okay. What this does is eliminates the age 65 and says the member's full retirement age for Social Security, because 65 isn't the age anymore. And people have been charged inappropriately. And this has been going on for an extended period of time. This just levels the playing field and says you'll pay it, but it'll be when you reach the full retirement age for Social Security.
And that present age listed on their website is 67, but as we know, it's been a moving target
And I
lately.
think it's gonna go up.
Yeah.
I'm going to give LBA a chance to talk here in a minute. But I want you to know that the federal CSRS system dealt with this issue by saying that the reduction happens at age 62 and has kept that constant. And the reason they kept it constant is because that's the earliest date that you can draw retirement without being on a disability or some other extraordinary pension. And that is the number that they use, and they reduce any civil service person who retires before that by a particular amount at age 62. I don't know how that fits in with the state and what the impact would be from the office, the LBA office, but I certainly want to give you the opportunity to talk to it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris Shea for the record from Legislative Budget Assistance Office. So currently, at age 65, your retirement is, annuity is decreased by the ratio of 166. Prior to that, from 60 to 65, it's a ratio of 1/60th is the calculation that's used to determine what your annuity would be. I believe the change that's being asked for in this bill is to align with the Social Security, which discussion has been that 65 change was aligned with Social Security back in the day, and as we've gotten, we live longer and Social Security for age requirements have increased, the suggestion is to move it to align with that. So if you were to retire at age 67, that the adjustment to the New Hampshire retirement would be done at that point. I'm not sure if anybody's from retirement is here behind me, but they would probably have a better and more eloquent way of saying what I'm saying.
I don't see anybody behind you that would be doing that, but the fiscal note came from New Hampshire Retirement System.
Excuse me,
And-
Senator, are you looking at the revised fiscal note dated on 27?
Yes.
Thank you.
The first thing in the book is where you put it, so I couldn't miss
Thank
it. And I appreciate that. So again, they're not anticipating any change or any cost till we get out to FY '26.
Correct. So with,
But that's 1.4 million at that level.
so the reason that you don't see any changes in 24, 25 are that the rates have already been set. So the next time that the rates are set would be 23. So that would impact 26 and 27. Excuse me. So that you would see the rate change, the impacts of this bill then starting in fiscal year 26. And the actuary assumes it would be about 1.1 million at the state level, and it would be about a $5.7 million increase at the local municipal level. So that would be built into the employer rates in the next cycle.
And if I extrapolate that, that means that it'll be longer before I've paid off any unfunded liability.
So if you look at the third page in on the fiscal note, there's a statement, it's the second to last paragraph. The actuary has estimated that this will increase your accrued liability, the unfunded accrued liability, about by 45 million. Again, which would be amortized over 20 years. So the statement's contained there, and that's what the retirement systems actuary has provided for information.
Senator Bradley.
Just so I understand what's happening here. Right now, your annuity gets discounted at 65 years of age.
That's correct.
So all this bill does is start the discounting at your actual age of retirement. Is that correct?
The Social Security age, so that
Yes, so if you are not eligible for Social Security until 67, it doesn't begin until the discount
Correct.
until 67.
correct.
Okay.
Certainly, I would rather, wait for a week on this because I don't know that some people would be happy with my vote, but I only get one vote on this committee.
Senator D'Alessandro, I'm willing to wait a week.
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, the level of comfort of the chair is very important.
It is indeed.
I
It is
want him
indeed.
to be as comfortable can be. That's why we sat him next to Senator Bursell. His level of comfort has been increased dramatically. And certainly I want him comfortable.
And so,
So I'll withdraw my motion and we'll wait until.
So I would just add, in looking at the hearing report, the biggest, obviously there's a projected future cost for the state, but the larger is to the municipalities, and Ms. Heck was neutral on the bill. It doesn't even sound like she testified, did she, Howard?
So
the bill's unfair.
Yeah, so
It's totally unfair.
So the ED&A committee came out 5-0 on this from a policy standpoint, that we felt that the policy of penalizing someone prior to their actual age of retirement wasn't fair. But in fairness, we didn't have a complete fiscal note when we saw this. We did not know the cost at that time. And the revised fiscal note has come out since, and I will admit it's a bit higher than I thought it was going to be when I'm looking at it now. So I wouldn't mind having the opportunity to have a little bit of time to digest this as well.
one of the things that I didn't say about the civil service retirement is that the reduction in the civil service retirement is based on whether or not you qualify for a Social Security benefit on your own. So Because of my service time, because of other employment that I had before I worked for the federal government, I had the required 40 quarters of coverage. And so certainly the way they do their system and doing it at age 62, which is the earliest you can retire, as I said before, it is only based on whether or not you qualify for that retirement or don't qualify for the retirement and would get it because of other reasons.
But if you retire at 62, you take a significant hit, a significant reduction in your retirement benefit. Yeah. And that benefit stays with you for the rest of your life.
But well, you wouldn't have to have to take retirement, but if you base the reduction on that smaller pension that you would have gotten at 62, and your benefits continue to grow later, again, it's a very complicated, and that is one of the reasons why I would like, to take the week. I would like to discuss with the rest of the Republican caucus, what our opinion is and go from there.
May I ask the LDA one question?
Absolutely.
If I'm remembering correctly from testimony, this penalty kicked in for folks that didn't retire, whether they retired or not, correct? So if their retirement age was 67, it didn't matter whether they were retired or not. They were paying the penalty even if they were still working. Is that correct?
The adjustment occurs at 65. So
Correct.
if you retire before 65, you're going to get that adjustment at 65. If you retire after or 65 or later, that's going to be.
So if you retired at 67, you were still getting penalized with the adjustment from 65 to 67.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's what I was remembering.
That's true.
Thank you.
But if you retire at 62, which is the earliest you can under Social Security, what happens at that point? Are you dinged at 65 or at the age before 65 when you've actually retired?
So if I retire at 62, I'm going to be getting the annuity at the 1/60th rate. So that's the factor that's used to determine, along with the number of years that I've worked and what my earnable compensation was. When I turn 65, they're going to use that 1/66 factor, and then it's going to reduce it because the assumption was at one point in time I was earning Social Security. That was offsetting that reduction. So the purpose of the bill is to say, okay, I'm going to, from 65 to 67, when I get my Social Security, I'm going to be earning something less. Right now, the purpose of the bill is to keep my retirement at a level that's close to equal to what I would lose as a result of getting Social Security.
So, if I
Excuse
might,
me.
Mr. Chair, there's no penalty if you retire between 62 and 65. The penalty is only if you retire at 65, or you cannot retire now until you're 67, but the penalty kicks in at 65.
Right.
So it's just that slice between 65 and 67.
Well, potentially 68, I think, is the top cap number, right?
Well, I think there's adjustments that are
Yeah.
occurring with Social Security.
Correct.
So
But I think 68
67,
is
67 and a
whatever it
half,
is.
68 is all factors. But yeah, for each individual, I think the purpose of the bill was to say when you started getting Social Security is when New Hampshire retirement system would use that second piece of formula and adjust your annuity down. So if you retire, if your Social Security kicks in at 68 because that's what they've determined, in terms of the age brackets and we live longer and all those good things, then it would be at that age that they would make that adjustment.
All right. Any other questions on this before I start asking about the bills we heard today? Okay. Is there anyone that wants to make any motions on the bills that we heard today?
I would move ought to pass on Senate Bill 124.
Senate Bill
Second that.
124, making an appropriation for the Eastern Slopes Regional Airport, made by Senator Innes, seconded by Senator Birdsell.
What was it, ought to pass?
Yes.
124 ought to pass.
Thank you.
I'm just letting Deb catch up here.
All set, Senator.
Comments?
So I'm assuming that this, and I appreciate the motion, thank you very much. But I'm assuming that the intent of the motion is ought to pass, adopted on the floor, and laid on the table. Is that?
That's correct.
What the consensus of the committee would be, because that's the way it should be, in my opinion.
Yes.
That all of these bills, well, we'll debate one of them, I guess, but should go into consideration of the budget when we have it.
All right, this is different than what you do in the House. When the Senate bill comes forward and has a significant appropriation to it or an appropriation to it, oftentimes we do table it after passing it so that we include it in our version of the budget, because if it goes to the House committee, it's not going to get there until after they have passed their House bill for the budget, and so therefore can't be incorporated into their portion and will be incorporated into ours. So just restating, stuff so that everyone, understands what we're doing. Senator Birdsell?
I just want to make sure, because I didn't ask the question when we passed the election information portal. I'm presuming that's going to be the same instance, because I know last year the House didn't go with it. Is that true?
Well, they didn't go with it, but certainly that's something that we can discuss in the caucus to see if that's the strategy we want to employ. Yes, the discussion from the Election Law Committee in the House, to the best of my recollection, was very positive, except for the high cost. And last year's bill, the way it was interpreted, is that this software that we would be implementing would help you identify, verify the person that was asking for it, such that you would be able to process the whole thing because of the information you got there. What this bill says for the portal is that the information is going to be provided to the town clerk, supervisor of the checklist, and they will institute collecting the information, distributing the forms that they need, et cetera. So,
Are all of these bills that we're putting through going to be tabled?
well, that's one of the things that I asked the Senate President up in his office this afternoon, is that we needed to come up with the list of the ones that we were going to table, and the ones that we were going to, because there's policy issues that the House needs to discuss, should be allowed to go forward into the House.
Well, I'd just say this. I mean, I appreciate that you want my advice, but it needs to be a group decision here.
And it will be, but sometimes we do like to caucus before we make those group decisions, so that one group or the other has an idea of what they want to do.
Well, the minority caucus
Well, I have a question.
Well, before we go on to too much more, we have an ought to pass motion on Senate Bill 124. Do you want to talk to Senate Bill 124?
Well, a question
Yes, ma'am.
for you. Is it your intention that we get bills that we think we might want to put in the budget into the shape we think they should be in the budget, or that we do that work when we have the budget? And on this bill, my specific question is because I think maybe we want to think about funding this bill out of the current year surplus, which is $315 million right now, rather than in the next biennium. We could pass it and lay it on the table, but then we have to come back and remember that when we're working on House Bill 2. Well, that's what I'm wondering. Is it your intention that we get the bills to where we like them?
The bills that we table for this purpose, okay, we'll go on a special list and we will track that list.
They're on the calendar.
Well, there's a lot of bills on the table on the calendar, but certainly bills that we pass through finance and that are tabled at that point, we know what we want to do with them, okay? Now, if there is additional language that we want, we are a committee like anyone else, and it's either going to go directly into House Bill 1 or directly into House Bill 2, or the bill that we take and gut because they didn't send us a House Bill 1 or 2.
That she's looking for.
Well, you know, every once in a while, we need to do that. So, again, right now, you know, I'm not overly concerned with the language because we will be in control of it because of something that comes through in House Bill 1 or 2. We may say, well, you know, their language was better and we just, you know, won't do with this and the funding is already there. Again, I can't answer those questions because I don't have the information.
So just remember.
But we do have the ability here to make a decision. And the decision, as stated by the president, was pass the bill, it goes to the floor, and it's tabled, as this has been our practice on bills like this. And if you want to change that, that's something. I kind of concur with that practice as it's been done in the past, and I think it's proved successful. But being in the minority at this point, you guys have the votes to decide what we're going to do. I'm just stating my opinion and precedent that we have used in the past. But we don't have to be governed by that. I mean, obviously, it's a good game.
If this bill passes the Senate floor, it is the position of the Senate, this is what we want. And including that into into our budget, when we get it from the House, is what I intend to do, okay? And if that is not done, it will be a decision of this committee that causes that not to happen. And, okay? So we're back to ought to pass motion on Senate Bill 124 FNA. Additional discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. 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 All those opposed? 7-0.
Want me to take it out?
Sure.
The Senate President can't do it.
Well, I took out, you take out one of mine, I'll take his. So I'll
Okay.
take this one out.
Okay. You got lucky.
Oh, you want to take it out?
I don't care, I'll take it out, sure, fine, it doesn't matter to me.
Doesn't.
I'll give it some nice talk.
Who is taking it out?
Senator
take it out.
Ennis would
Yeah,
like
why
to
not?
take it out.
Okay.
Yeah. Anything else? Without anybody saying I want something else, I'll accept the motion to come out of executive session. So we have multiple firsts and multiple seconds on that. All those in favor say aye. Aye. And our business being completed for the day, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Hey, Dad,
Yes,
do we keep these or do you keep them?
no, you leave them here.
Yeah, I don't know.
Anything you need
Don't
goes in
touch
there.
the finance